Hello there, thank you for joining me again today. Just thought we'd do a review on some magazines and things and some technical books. Bit of a series I'm going to start doing, which is where weekly we look at different technical books and publications and magazines and things like that to do with RF and electronics engineering, radio frequency engineering, etc. And I found this What's New in Electronics magazine, which is December 1986, would you believe? So quite a vintage magazine. Must have been a publication that was quite popular at the time. I do recollect as a child buying this many years ago. So whether it's still available now, I'm not sure. But interesting how these magazines were very, very popular back in the 1970s, 80s, etc. But we'll get straight into it. It looks like as if it's got quite a bit to it. It's quite a thick magazine in comparison to today's magazines that tend to be quite thin between the sheets. So more bang for your buck back then in 1986. I don't know how much it cost. There's no price on the front of it. So, but anyway, we'll have a look. So go straight into it. Page number 1, and we can see, as people who are subscribers to my channel or regular viewers know, that we do a lot of dealings on this channel with Marconi instruments, and these must have been the prices back in 1986, which is quite interesting to know. So looks like a Marconi 2440 microwave counter, or 3650, a 2305 modulation meter, of £5,392. A Marconi 2955 radio comms test set was £5,750, and a 2022 AM/FM signal generator was £2,950. I think that's a 2382-80 spectrum analyzer, which had the display unit separate, I believe, on those models, which were 100 Hz to 400 MHz, was £18,950. A 2610 true RMS voltmeter to 25 MHz was £1,200, and a 2019 AM/FM signal generator to 1040 MHz was £4,530. And 2018 AM/FM signal generator to 520 MHz was £4,300. Again, very expensive test gear when you look at it. I mean, Grundig TV test equipment now, look at that. You know, some of the prices of that for testing out, you know, looking at quite an expense there. Fluke digital meters, and the prices back then in those days. You know, talking serious investment. You know, if you were a business at the time, investing in buying test equipment for your workforce to do maintenance and service, then you know, it was quite an expensive thing at the time. Let's have a look, see what else we've got. A couple of things here on transputers and some components. So there's some little stories and comments and things. Epson, they used to do a lot of printers and low profile terminals. These are still quite popular, these terminals, even today. Still got loads of those. Product guide, different things, components, hardware. RAF International Limited at East Grinstead in Sussex, England. So they're probably long gone now, or maybe not. Tantalums, the fire starters of electronics, as I like to call them. Got attenuators, miniature hybrids, high signal processing. Got an article on that. Capacitors, delay lines, alarms and buzzers and things like that, as well as miniature cells for batteries, etc. And of course potentiometers, I think, as well up here. ultra miniature 60 dB minimum isolation relays, obviously used in many different applications, including RF and what have you. So relays and timers and the good old switches. Quite 70s looking actually, those switches. Beryllium copper contacts and things, and of course there's good old Mullard as well. Product line, new problem solving disk controllers, because these in the days when we had 8086 microprocessors and 80286s, I think we're just coming out around about 84, and a few ads and things in here, and we've got some high performance looks like relays here as well. I've seen those quite a lot in used in many different applications, but I've seen that shape of relay in washing machine controllers and things like that. Bit on resistors, quality assurance for critical systems. So looks like it's some kind of valve arrangement for cooling and things like that. So even in the electronics catalogues, they were selling things like hydraulic and water lines for cooling and various things. And of course then we've got Dale Electronics, who manufactured a lot of did a lot of components, surface mount resistor networks and thermistors and various other components. It was the days when you used to get paper catalogues sent through to your door, big thick catalogues. None of this internet rubbish back then, it was all books and data books and catalogues and component catalogues and things like that. You filled your workshop up back then with publications. Looks like we've got a component supplier here. Some prices as well. When you look at the prices as well, they're quite interesting. What's this here? Micro screws, little screwdrivers, electronic screwdrivers for production and assembly work. Clicking contact, the membrane keypads that you used to tend to find in the 1980s on a lot of industrial gear, microwave ovens, things like that, for pressing getting the clicky tactile contact. Oscilloscopes, Tektronix, good old Tektronix, still going strong. Looking at their line of scopes, computers. Now then, look at that. Information there on different aspects of computing as well, and yeah, what have I got here then? More to do with computing and plotters or printers, things like that. And of course there's things like pressure sensor transducers and things which were used in various applications. And then we've got programmer here, intelligent programmer, represents unrivaled value and the flexibility sought by all those involved in the production, copying and software development. And this is a S2010 slave program available at £595. Wow. It's fast programming algorithms for all major manufacturers, remote commands via RS-232 interface, 40 kbytes of RAM, expandable to 512 kilobytes. It says low-cost slave copiers for programming up to 48 devices simultaneously, software expandable for new devices. Yeah, very good. Tailor-made to fit products worth protecting. Nice little bits. And then we've got some more index for components and things somebody was supplying, RS numbers, things like that in comparison. Today's computer is fast, tomorrow's will be even faster. You don't say. When you look at that computer and IBM, I think I had one of those, an IBM PS2, I think it was, that came around about this time, and it had a green screen on it, and it were 2 floppy disk drives in the front. I think they were 5 1/4 inch discs that were about this big, and it cost a fortune, that computer. I remember buying it, and yeah, and it was an 80286, I think, or an 80386, something like that. So after my Z80 that I had, which was an 80886, I think, with rubber keys. A complete universal programming system. So EEPROM programmers as well. I don't know how much that cost, but I bet that wasn't cheap in its time. And then we've got hardware. Some more components. Coaxial connectors, green power, you see, good quality. It's a shame they went to the wall. I think Maycom took them over, but they're still, if they're still about, Maycom, I'm not sure if they are now, but they used to make really good RF plugs and connectors. I've still got many green power plugs and connectors. We're talking about here DC micro motors and steppers and things like that. Keithley. A voltmeter, the new 194 voltmeter. But they're still being sold, even to this day, second hand on eBay, people buying them. More indexers, leave it to Wave Tech, test and measurement. More Tektronix adverts. Built to last, price to buy. Data acquisition. We have a data recorder which thinks it's fast in a crisis. Recording data on an IBM PC compatible. Look at those for discs. You see, I had those. And this here looks remarkably like a Scion organizer. There was a company back in the 80s that created a filofax, digital filofax it was known as, and it was called the Scion organizer. And the Scion Organizer PS2, I think it was called, or Scion Organizer 2, and it had a big keypad here, and that looks remarkably like it. It isn't, of course, you know, it's obviously a fluke instrument, but looks very similar design to it. Some people might remember that from the olden days. Got some more computer related bits here, low cost of logic analysis, and different scopes and things like that, articles on that. Beryllia ceramics, again for TO3 transistors and other things, thermal insulators. And I've actually got one of those Thurlby Thandar as I like to call them. I've got one of those power supplies in the workshop here, actually, buried under a pile of other stuff still to this day. So how much were they then? And they were quite expensive then, weren't they? So a TS3021, I think it is, was £150 plus VAT, and a TS3022 was £280 plus VAT at the time. Interesting. Prices were obviously quite expensive back then, you know. Gold oscilloscopes, they're still about, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Got some chip data, some chips, product features, memory package by custom service, surface mount added range, etc. Added to range, diode packages, things like that. Protection devices, linear potentiometers, Well, used in mainly industrial applications, you know, slide variable resistors, potentiometers. Teledyne relays, these are still about. Teledyne, they're a big defence organisation, manufacture these different relays which were used in a lot of RF signal generators and step attenuators and test gear in RF circles, and still about today. I have many Teledyne relays still about, but very expensive components, made for aerospace and defence applications in the defence sector. Thermal fusers and thermistors, you know. Don't forget, back in the day, you know, all this was all new stuff, you know. It was all just coming out, and very exciting time to be in electronics. The British Connection quality cables, I don't know if they're still about. Probably long since gone, they have. This interface with a future built in, not bolted on. So Mitel semiconductor. ISDN. That's interesting. Because obviously ISDN back then in the 1980s, for those that don't know, particularly here in the UK, it was just coming in. It was to replace the what was the old PSTN, public switch telephone network, the old analog 50 volts DC thing, and the ISDN 2Es, ISDN 30 channel digital service that was brought in by British Telecom at the time, and of course that replaced a lot of the old analog lines, especially for businesses and things. We could hold concurrent calls simultaneously. You know, depending on what ISDN circuit you had, whether it was a 2E, it was like 4 channels, one for transmit, one for receive per channel. So you could have 2 concurrent phone conversations on ISDN 2E, but on ISDN 30 you could have up to 30 concurrent phone conversations at any one time down one copper circuit. So, and it's funny now that's going out. Obviously with the advent of fibre and IP VoIP, that's all disappearing down the road now. But in its day, there was a big program across the world, not just here in the UK, but Bell Labs over in the United States, etc., was very big in rolling out ISDN telephone exchanges to various parts of the states, etc. And you know, it was a major thing both here in the UK and the USA of upgrading all the telephone exchanges and stripping them out to build ISDN telephone exchange within the same building as the old PSTN system. Gazelle, Mars Electronics, that looks quite a fancy computer, considering it's colour screen as well, because a lot of them weren't back then. We'll have a monochrome, a green. Enclosures made to measure. What do they do then? Jackson Brothers London Limited. Variable capacitors and trimmers, friction and gear reduction drives, standoff insulators, all sorts of little bits and bobs there. Flexible couplings, low power charging market, Cliff capacitors, solder D range, and then of course we're studying advanced technology. Hitachi, they're still about, obviously, making bits and bobs. And then we've got these meter flute meters. No prices. What else have I got here? Create the fastest custom LSI service. We took guidance from above. Don't get the best logic programmer by cutting corners. Or do you? So for £1,995. Can you believe it? For that. So I don't think prices have changed that much really over the years. I mean, when you look at the cost of test gear today versus back then, like for like, I think they were more expensive then when you considered the salary that people or businesses or the economy of the time. It was a big investment compared to today's test gear, which is generally quite cheap now in comparison to then. So maybe the prices haven't changed that much, but yet again, maybe they have. I don't know. Maybe put some comments below as to what you think. But here we are. Look, Casper upgrades BBC to 6800 processor, 68,000 processor for £299. These expansion cards. I remember a lot of the PCs back then, they had math core processors as well as upgrades that you had to plug in extra so they could do the maths a bit quicker and thus work a bit faster. Laser printing. This big laser cutting. This is the kind of production equipment that they had for cutting, laser cutting PCBs or enclosures, things like that. Again, some more articles here about different things, pros, materials, tools, tooling and production aids, soldering. Midland Ross did a range of connectors, plugs and things. What we got here? Prom out. The new tool. Pull proms out, you see. So I think I've got some of those actually. And defect screen. Mitsubishi. Gas FET and FET laser diodes and amplifiers. And Aspen Electronics. They're still about. They actually do test equipment now. A lot of RF gear and things. I've bought things from them in the past. But I had some data books, some Mitsubishi data books, and they were brilliant. And I got rid of them. I sold them to somebody many years ago when I was quite young. I wish I'd never done that. And they were orange. I always remember them. They were a 3-volume book, and they were orange covers and Japanese into English translation in them. And they had all the Mitsubishi RF devices in them and modules that Mitsubishi made with all the data sheets. And I sold the books, and I always regret doing that for some reason, because their data books are very good. And all the RF transistors and RF semiconductors that they ever made was all in these 3-volume of books, and I got rid of them. And I had Motorola ones the same as well. I had all the bipolar transistors in, the RF bipolar ones, as well as the FETs at the time. We're talking like 1980s, 90s, early 2000s sort of books. And I had quite a few volumes of those, and I sold those as well. And I have always regretted getting rid of those books, even to this day. Anyway, we move on. Mullard, see, another British company that went to the wall. They used to do quite a lot of semiconductors, did Mullard as well. And obviously PIR at the time, body sensing detectors, PIR technology was quite in its infancy back then in the 1970s, 80s. And being able to, there's a big thing about not detecting pets, but detecting bodies, humans. So if you had pets like dogs, cats, things like that, the alarm wouldn't falsely trigger. I mean, this back in the days when most burglar alarms, I still had pressure mats under the carpets and things like that, and magnetic switches on the windows and window tape. So PIRs were actually a very significant advance in burglar alarm technology at the time. Rare earth magnets, field programmable logic sequencers, 12-bit tracking AD converters, semiconductors, multiplying DAC is fastest 12-bit yet. We've got some other bits and bobs down here. Some of these semiconductors in different packages. Marconi. What does that say? Electronic Devices Limited. MEDL. We've got some catalogues from them which we'll be reviewing on this channel of RF devices, but they used to have a place out in Lincolnshire, as well. They have places all over the UK. They've all gone now. Marconi, they've gone. Smart Pack, security sensitive micros, one-time programmability. What's that? Quandron, is it? Quandon. Isn't that a vegan food now? I think it is Quorn. But it's Quandon. Integrated circuits, microcomputer boards and systems. So, obviously Raytheon, Plessey. I don't know if they're still about now. Some of these other companies. I know Raytheon and Plessey. I don't know about Plessey. They went to the wall, I think. Is that Mitel? I'm not right sure. I can't remember what that is. I can't remember. I've seen that logo before, but I'm just trying to remember. Is it Texas Instruments? That's it. That was Texas Instruments. SEF. I've seen those before, and AMLs. So, and this. So I think, I think some of those have gone to the wall now. Synetics. I don't know if they're still about. Maybe they are. Maybe they're not. PTFE and coax. Different RF coaxial cables and things. Mert Electrical Components Limited in Reading, Berkshire, in England. I think they've gone. What else? Wire and fibre optic cable strippers. And Smartex, the first exhibition takes space in your diary. Wide range of solid state relays. Yeah, the first stuff about. Again, microscopes and things like that. These will have been really expensive, I would have thought. They normally, back in those days, this was quite advanced technology at the time that come over from medical to be used in electronics production and electronics engineering. And these would have been significantly expensive, I would have thought, these optics. ORCAD, schematic design and more for only £595. There you go. If you can't believe these features at this price, then send for a free demo pack and you'll get a gigantic disc that'll come in the post. ARS Microsystems. There we go. Sub-assemblies. Get that for a computer. Some more, look. Intelligent monitoring and control with BBC Basic. Yes, I had a BBC computer. And for those who know a lot about computing, they'll remember the big battle between Alan Sugar in Amstrad, Michael Sugar Trading, which was Amstrad, and then BBC Micro, and the big battle as well with Clive Sinclair as well. Clive Sinclair at the time with the Sinclair Spectrum and the BBC Micro. There was big battles that went on between those companies to try and get the corner of the market, and the race to develop the best computer between them. And of course, when you look at this now, this is obviously more related to doing what is testing and using BASIC and IBM machines to obviously interrogate different circuits and things. And there's still companies about, quite local to where I live even today, that do testers that, that test out circuits for railways, military, industrial electronic, and actually diagnose to component level on the board what's failed. Sort of a test and repair, don't throw away kind of methodology. So this is sort of the start of it all, really. Let's have a look. Some more sub-assemblies and bits and bobs. Membrane keyboards from Roland Automation Limited. And then people used to get these guides with all the different manufacturers and suppliers in as well, so that you could obviously send off for these guides, and then you could be in a position where you've got access to suppliers, because again, this is in the days before the internet. I think that's some kind of probe or whatever. Programmers for EPROMs and things, ELAN, powerful benefits, sort of DC switch mode modules and things like that. MPS, monolithic technology, 11-bit flash breaks the time barrier. It's all gold, you see. That's when gold was cheap. So there's so much now in disposals, waste electronic, where they reclaim the gold from these components. And that's why even now these older components are still sought after for gold reclamation, you know. But back in the day, of course, you know, quite a lot of electronics had a lot of gold in it, and still does even today with RF in particular. Everybody's seen these, you know, especially on the old 80s electronics in particular, and even fairly modern stuff still has this colour coded dip switches, which is quite useful. And then we've got the data books and things. Thorn EMI. Instrument systems. Obviously, another 100 processors from now, the UDL will still be developing. So again, Universal Development Laboratory by Thorn. Adhesive cables and clips and things, still useful even to this day. And again, looks like an import-export components reseller. Get stuck into Europe. The only specialist SMD exhibition in mainland Europe, devoted exclusively to surface mount SmartX Europa. Secure place at SmartX conference 87. SmartX 87 conference. So must be the 87th conference then, not 1987, because this is 1984, I assume. Data and technical information. Free literature. Cumulative index. Data technical information as well. Vacuum cleaners. More like for when it comes to the vote on cleaning, decision makers are interested in two areas: efficiency and cost effectiveness. That's why the majority choose Nelfisk suction cleaners, because they know that Nelfisk offer the highest standards of engineering, outstanding design, and a reputation for quality and long life that has no equal. That's why we're one of the largest manufacturers of industrial suction cleaners in the world, and why we're the first choice in the corridors of power and the halfways, always, classrooms, canteens and offices. Data file. So these are all your data books and things like that, and where you can request them from. And I think as well, Maplin Electronics, that's gone now, just fairly recently. That went to the wall, unfortunately. A bit like Tandy and all the other suppliers, they all went to the wall. and there's not many of them left now. Data file again, some more. PCB guide. And this of course is the days when you used to etch your own PCBs in chemicals, and you could then obviously buy all the circuit boards and the actual chemicals, the etching chemicals, and the print traces that you used to get that you rubbed out on the board to create your tracks and your lands, etc. This is all before the days of what we have today, where it's just, you know, nothing really to make a circuit board, whereas back then, you know, it was quite a feat, and then you had to drill it yourself and everything else, you know, and get all the chemicals and etch all the copper off and clean it and all that faffing about. So that's all gone now. PC guide, products and services. And light bulbs and other things like that damaged in transit. People selling different crates and things like that that protect goods in transit. Complete versatility. Highland Electronics Limited. Looks like they sell all kinds of switches and key switches and push buttons, things like that. Ex-rental equipment. £100 million worth of ex-rental equipment for sale, it says. International inventory. And that's it there, look. That's the back page. The most powerful universal program in the world. Stag. Interesting. Nice to sort of go back to the good old days of analog electronics, and obviously, you know, digital semiconductors as well. Don't forget, this is in the era not long after, well, there was still lots of equipment around at that time that still had valves in as well, and a lot of engineers and people that have been brought up on valves did find it a little bit difficult in some cases to transition to bipolar and FET devices and semiconductors, because they'd literally come around about in the late 60s, early 70s with the advent of the you know, the silicon transistor, and then naturally people had to transition from valve tube technology into what would be semiconductors and things like that. A bit like in RF engineering, there were quite a lot of RF engineers brought up with crystals, and then of course when synthesized radios became available, then they had to learn about VCOs, synthesizers, phase lock loops, microprocessors and EEPROMs and more digital electronics involved, because naturally radios then became half microcomputer, half RF radio, and the two were sandwiched together, came together as a package then to create what was a modern radio transceiver that could be programmed using software, a handheld programmer. And it was the same with television sets. You know, we went from TVs that had black and white TVs with valves in them to colour televisions with valves in them, and then obviously we then transitioned into CRT, PAL TVs and NTSC TVs that had obviously valves in them still, and then we progressed then into flat square tubes when with transistors and semiconductors, and then, you know, things progressed with digital electronics, NICAM sound, teletext and all these other services that came about at that time, and then the CRTs became flatter and obviously started getting bigger in size, so when they got to the widescreen technology as well, and upscaling as well to create sharper pictures. We had Betamax video around at the time, Philips video disc, VHS, the big battle between VHS and Betamax. So there were so many things going on at this time. Burglar alarms were coming in big in the 1980s. You know, everybody wanted burglar alarms and things like that on their homes. And there was a big industry in burglar alarms and electronics associated with burglar alarm technologies and installations and what have you. So it was a really good time to be an electronics engineer in the 1980s. in particular. You know, and there's a lot of advances being made available, and the technology was evolving at such a rate, especially with the space age at the time, and the developments of technology into military and space technology, which then ultimately fed through into commercial areas some years later. So there was major advances at the time. You know, in comparison to today, we have little advances today really in technology compared to what it was like in the 1980s, in my view. But anyway, put your comments in the description below. I hope you've enjoyed that little flick through of this magazine. Obviously quite a popular magazine, and we'll have a look at some others next week. And thank you for watching, and catch you in the next one. Bye for now.